I'm Principleasure. Welcome to my studios in downtown Los Angeles. Today we're going to go through my selection of hardware and look at how I created my debut album, One. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a very extensive selection of vintage analog synthesizers here. Let's take a little tour around the room. Starting over here, we have the Emulator 2 with a extensive sound library here, a bunch of like Depeche Mode, early Pet Shop Boys style sounds. Got very interesting ex-owner. Roland JD800, used this a lot for the pads, used it on the track Zizix on the record. EMU Drumulator, very nice EEPROM sounding machine for those, again, Depeche Mode early type EEPROM sounds. Jupiter 6, used the arpeggios a lot on the first EP I did, and it gets used at various points in the album. Really nice for pads, not great for basses. Very flexible and amazing factory presets. Original ARP Odyssey Mark 1 here. I use this a lot for like kind of SFX sort of sounds, like weird sort of alien noises and stuff like that. Korg Poly 61. Very underrated in my opinion. Great for those sort of Boards of Canada style, chordy kind of off-tune sounds. SP1200, this is a bit of a workhorse in the studio. It's a complete pain in the ass to sample into, but once you get it all set up, it has this amazing grit and a very cool swing functionality in the sequencer. Use that for a bunch of the snares in the record. Got the polysynths here, starting with the Nordlead 3. Very cool arpeggio sounds here. It sounds great synced to MIDI clock, and I've spent years building presets for this thing. Roland Juno 106, a bit of a workhorse, gets used a lot for a variety of sounds really, primarily the pads and basses, and I love that classic Roland chorus. Jupiter 8 with Europa mod. Amazing thing about this is that you can kind of split it in two, where you can have one sound playing a preset on the left hand side of the key and the upper keys play another sound. I used it a lot on the track Flux Jab. I synced the arpeggiator to the cowbell on the TR-808 and fed that via MIDI clock on my computer and just basically let it run for 3 minutes and created all sorts of crazy off-kilter arpeggios. A relatively new acquisition down here is the Prophet 5 sequential circuits, classic synth. It's been used on so many cool records. Oberheim OB8 here without MIDI, but again gets used a lot. I use this on Flux Jab. It's amazing for pads and chord sounds. Got the Focal Trios here, Yamaha NS10s fed by Bristol, very good for getting a second opinion on mixes. DBX60, very cheap compressor, gets used a lot on in mono on drums and vocals and bass guitar. MKS80 with MPG80 controller. This is kind of like a Jupiter 7. It sits somewhere between a Jupiter 6 and a Jupiter 8. It's got very extensive MIDI spec for a machine of its age. I've got the Deckard's Dream here. It doesn't get used that much, to be honest. I haven't really dived into it. It's only in mono, and it would be nice to have the expansion board, but it's kind of on the expensive side. Empirical Labs Distressor. This has been used on everything I've ever done for as long as I can remember. Use it in mono on kicks and snares primarily. Was used a lot on the track Hexagonal Dab from the record and Handwork. Got the Mayo 10 MIDI interface, which has 10 ins and outs from iConnectivity. This is my SBX1 MIDI sync box, which takes MIDI clock from Cubase from the computer, spits it out into a bunch of DIN sync and MIDI splitters here. I'm feeding the Roland TR-808, 909, TB303, 606, and 707 via DIN sync. Here I've also got the MPC60, which has a very extensive library and has a bunch of really cool sounds on there. Again, has that nice 12-bit sampling going on. The Electribe sampler, which is kind of underrated in my opinion. I use this a lot for the claps on Handwork and Hexagonal Dab. I think the clap sound originally came from a clap trap or a Nord drum. Korg MS-20M, really nice for feeding kick drums through the filter, and you can get this really nice distortion sound if you tweak the resonance up. Down here we've got the Korg DW8000, which is a very underrated 1980s synthesizer. I used that a lot on the album. Fender jazz bass here, Japanese jazz bass, very nice sound coming out of that. Octatrack by Electron. Haven't really dived into it too much, have to be honest. Oberheim DSX sequencer. I picked this up in Korea, and it's a great companion for the OB8. I can't seem to figure out how to get it to work just now, so if anybody out there can help me out on that one, that'd be awesome. Roland Juno 60, I use this on mainly for bass lines. I used it in the bass line for Flux Jab and Axiom. This has been MIDI modified, so the MIDI clock now is triggered via, the arpeggiator rather, is triggered via MIDI clock. Lindrum LM2, the kick is used all the way through the record, and then I've modified the toms with an EEPROM. SH101, use this for the bass line on hexagonal DAB, really good for basses and leads. MC202, very similar architecture to the 101. That's being CV gated by the BeatStep Pro. Analog 4 here, use the chord stabs of this a lot on the track Rise. Sequential Circuits Pro 1, amazing for leads. I've got my fledgling modular gear down here. I've got the Make Noise, Braids, I've got Cloud and Maths as well, very cool devices in there. Korg Volca boxes, amazing fun for messing around with in a live setting. Fender Telecaster, Korg Rhythm 55 drum box, Monologue, and Roland CSQ 100 sequencer. Teenage Engineering OP1, Lin 9000. I used the snare on hexagonal DAB. It's an awesome kind of Stock Aitken Waterman disco drum machine, which Roger Lynn did in the late 80s. And that then led to him creating the Akai MPC 60. I've got the Mark II here, which has an enhanced software OS versus the Mark I, but it's ugly. The Roland TR505, amazing for like industrial kicks and snares. It's a good one to try to get your hands on if you're hunting on eBay. Sequential Circuits drum tracks, another EEPROM drum machine. The Moog Rogue, which in fairness hasn't really ever been used. Sequential Circuits, multi-track and 6-track up here. And then this awesome SBX 80 sync box, which sometimes holds the 909 and 303 together. Okay, let's look at one of the project files here. This is a track called Handwork, which is on the album. Just going from top to bottom here, we've got a couple of Jupiter 8 parts. We've got the Jupiter 8 reverb out, which was printed through an Eventide harmonizer. Elka Synthex, we've got a couple of parts there, and then the constituent reverbs again through the harmonizer. SH101 and its reverb here. We have a couple of 101 parts here playing different variations. We've got like a reverse effect thing coming out of the ARP. Korg reverb part, probably coming from the Poly 61 here. And then we've got the Korg Monopoly down here playing a bunch of percussive stuff and some 808 parts, and then an Xfer Nerve across the bottom playing some drum parts. Let's play some audio. Right, let's solo out some of these parts so you guys can get an idea of what's doing what. I've sampled the kick and snare into Nerve. So that's just playing out like a really basic kick and snare pattern across a one bar. I've got the 101 playing the bass line here. I've got my reverse effects coming from the ARP. Korg monopoly with some reverb added from the Eventide harmonizer. The TR-808 is playing the cymbals. That's been MIDI clocked, and that pattern has just been recorded into its internal sequencer. Got a variation here on the hi-hats. The 101 here is a combination of different takes that have been filtered at different points. We've got the SH101 reverb part here, which, as I mentioned, it's been printed through the harmonizer. We've got a Korg monopoly playing a bunch of effects, which I just played in on the keys. Let's solo those. And then we've got the analog-synthezer playing this kind of like drone thing. The Jupiter 8 is playing this arpeggio. This has been triggered using the rim shot, I believe, out of the 808. So that pattern is being triggered by step sequencing the rim shot on the 808. Got a couple of different variations, an octave apart. That lovely Eventide reverb on there. Obviously that's permanent. The only thing that can be done to this is it can be brought down in volume or brought up. Sometimes I reverse these reverbs and EQ those in different ways. Got the analog-synthezer playing this string part with its reverb. And then in the breakdowns, I have the Korg monopoly reverb reversed here with these parts which I played in by hand. And then everything kicks back in here with a different cymbal pattern with some open hi-hats going there. The 101's filtered down a little. The analog-synthezer is playing like a low drone. The SH101 comes back in with its lower arpeggio, and then I twit it with a higher arpeggio. And then we add some 808 congas towards the end and really start filtering that 101 and doubling it here. Those 808 congos have been cut up in there by me and Cubase. Cubase is really good for that kind of stuff. EQ wise, there's not a whole lot going on, to be honest. A lot of this is just like high pass filtering. Some of these analog synths tend to have a lot of energy in the low end, which can't necessarily be heard like below 20 hertz. So typically I would slap a compressor or some kind of transient designer. You can see here that a bunch of this stuff hasn't really been processed that much aside from the high pass. I like to get my sound just sounding really nice and thick and right from the outset, so I don't have to do too much processing inside the DAW. Right, so this is what my live setup looks like in practice. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we're using this Roland SBX1 sync box. So I just send MIDI clock from Cubase. It's synced with all the audio that's currently in the DAW, and the only thing you're hearing there is like a drone that's coming from Zone. And that's sending MIDI clock in here via the MIDI interface, and that then is feeding all these devices. So we'll start with the 808 and throw some kicks in. And this is exactly how I would start a track normally. Throw some hi-hats in. Rim shot. We've got the 606 and the 303 as well here, which are both chained up. So I'm going to put some hi-hats in here from the 606. And some open hi-hats as well. The 606 does this really cool thing where the closed and open hi-hat kind of like get each other out. Got the 909 down here. I'm going to throw on some rides. Then we've got our 303 in here as well if we want that. I've just pre-programmed some crappy sound in there. We can change the waveform in the back as well. I personally don't think it's thick enough to carry a track by itself, so I want to shut it off from here. And instead I'm going to do something a little more interesting, which is we're going to trigger the Juno 60, which is over here, from the 808 cowbell. So we'll just select cowbell on here, and we'll throw a cowbell on every step. And that's now triggering the Juno 60 in real time. So whatever I play here, will be in time with everything else that's on the MIDI clock. You can do some pretty cool bass sounds on here as well. And then if we want to go back here, shut off this ride cymbal, I would just like turn that down, go back to my kick and just fire it so it's like 4 to the floor. If we go to our cowbell here, we can pick and choose which steps we want, so let's make it kind of like more of a rolling thing. And that's in earnest how I would go about creating something using real-time MIDI clock. There's loads of other stuff that's synced in here which I can bring in as well, like the MPC60, the TR-707, the Electribe is on the chain, the Analog-4 is on there as well. You can see that it's like syncing in real time. I can get all the modular stuff going. I haven't actually turned it on right now, but I can send CV gate from like the SH101. The 101 can actually send CV gate out, but also receive clock pulses from any of the 909, 808 or 606's rim shots out and do its own funky bassline thing as well. So now we're taking all the parts that we recorded in live, like this SP1200 drum loop, adding some soft synths, in this case Zone, and just trying to build a basic groove. This is the SP1200 loop. I'll just quickly play this. Loop it. I'm just going to cut a few bits out of it, so we're going to get rid of some of these additional kicks here, which probably makes sense, and just doing a quick fade in here. That's better, and then we're going to just loop that. Just go for 8 bars for now. And we've got Zone here just playing like a long note basically, which I just played in on D3. So let's just hear how that sounds. And this is a patch in Zone I've just made here. I've placed all my important macros here, like reverb, LFO amount to oscillator tuning, Osmod amount, filter cutoff, and release. So let's just automate some of that stuff. We'll record this automation in real time, so let's go back into Zone and automate some stuff. Recorded the basis of that automation. I'm just going to show that in Cubase. We've got a filter cut off here, so we'll start that low, and we'll sweep that up like every two bars, and yeah, we'll just kind of jam this out and see how it's meant to sound. And then we've got our release here, which let's not delete all of that. Let's just delete some of it. Make that go gradually up and see how that sounds. got some other parts here, like the 606 hi-hats, which we recorded earlier. I'll put those in too. And I've just taken like a rough 7 bars of this and just lived it. So this is kind of how my arrangements would normally come together. And then I just cut like hits out here. Start adding those to the mix. And just like crafting my way through this really. Kind of like a live jam using Cubase as a sequencer. Thank you to everybody watching this on the Beatport page on Facebook. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'll be sure to jump on there and answer any questions you have about my process.